About 6 months ago, I was scouring the internet for good content when I came across a video made by the YouTuber Solar Sands. This was a video depicting a room full of objects that weren't actually anything anyone has ever created or seen. They do, however, look very recognizable to objects you have seen before. Basically, you get caught in this mindset where nothing in the room is familiar enough to definitively say that it is a certain object, but at the same time, it's familiar enough to relate to something. People question the original creator's intentions when they made this. It was theorized that the original intent was to show the effects of what happens when someone has a stroke. It's still a concept that you can relate this to, but it's not the intention since it was later proven that it was run through a generator that turned a normal image into this weird amalgamation. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. Chances are, if you're watching this video, you probably also watched the Solar Sands video, so you know where I'm going with this. He then went through his own description of the Caretaker album, Everywhere at the End of Time. I was then intrigued by this video because when he described the album, I'd never heard of anyone doing anything like this before. So I did one quick YouTube search, and I discovered the video, and let me tell you, it's a ride. Everywhere at the End of Time is an album dictating dementia and its progression. Currently at the moment have an uncle who is suffering from this horrible disease, and that's why this album intrigued me more. Although, even just the Solar Sands video was not enough to prepare me for what I was about to face. I was a little put off though, when in the video he mentioned that the album is 6 hours long. I figured it was probably best leaving the album to everyone else because I do actually admit I have really bad ADHD and I don't know if I could sit through an album like that for more than an hour. About 2 months ago though, I don't remember how, but I saw the album again, and I don't know what made me do it, but I decided to tough it out and go through the entire thing. It's an experience. But before I can tell you that, we have to talk about the creator. This album is made by an English artist, Leland Kirby, going under the artist name The Caretaker, which he has actually been going after since September of 1999 when he made his debut album, Selective Memories of the Haunted Ballroom. You can find it on YouTube with a quick search, and this album gives you a small taste of the type of music Kirby creates. The music in question is an old-timey drone music filled with white noise that gives you incredible uneasy feelings of anxiety and dread. This type of music is a career Leland Kirby has prized himself over. This music is also prevalent in his 2011 album, An Empty Bliss Beyond This World. This album is an on and off switch of pleasant music and at the same time music filled with different tamperings such as subtle bass boosting, more white noise, and switching between the light and rough microphones, which confuses the listener incredibly, and halfway makes the experience either anxiety-inducing or just straight bittersweet. This album also is filled with late 20s music. And Everywhere at the End of Time, Leland Kirby took inspiration when making the first track of this album, It's Just a Burning Memory, from Al Boley's music number titled Heartaches, which is an old jazz track, and this title is used throughout the album. You should really search it up on YouTube. It is a vibe, let me tell you. But Al Boley unfortunately died in a bombing raid at a relatively young age. It is very nice to see his music being shared on another medium after all these years. But I'm getting off topic again, I tend to do that. Let's talk about the second man who made this album come to life. Before we discuss Everywhere at the End of Time, we must also take a look at the abstract artist Ivan Seal, for he had a very great part in bringing this album its meaning as well. Leland Kirby and Ivan Seal have been working together since the Haunted Ballroom album, and the art that they produce goes together hand in hand. Ivan Seal makes various degrees of abstract artwork with one Google search, and you will see what I mean. This man has built his career over it. Let me give you a taste of Ivan Seal's work. Like, look at this. What is it supposed to be? Like, it's cool one with the horse though, that's pretty pog. Ivan Seal made the album covers for most of the projects Kirby has been working on, including Everywhere at the End of Time. There are actually 6 covers for this behemoth of an album, and I'll reveal them to you later. For now, just know that Ivan's artwork is necessary for the depiction of dementia Kirby was creating. I think now, however, it's finally time to get through this album. Stage 1. The beginning. This album is spread into 6 stages. These 6 stages are supposed to represent the actual progression of dementia. As each stage progresses, the music gets more and more distorted. Sounds pretty simple, right? There's just a long decline of music distortion. Well, I guess you could say that. The album itself is just music degrading, but it is in such a way that fits so well with the actual concept of dementia. It's hard to explain just how well it fits, so let's run down each stage and find out. Stage 1 is the beginning, ground zero of the experience. The stage and rest of the stages are completely based on oldies music, just like in Empty Bliss and the Haunted Ballroom. This is an interesting music choice, because its intent is to put you in the shoes of an elder, reminiscing on the old days in their youth. It's supposed to make you relate to them, and it does a damn good job doing so. In the description of the album, Kirby gives the descriptions for each of the stages. The first stage description states that, quote, "Here we experience the first signs of memory loss. This stage is most like a beautiful daydream, the glory of old age and recollection, the last of the great days." The cover art for this stage is abstract, but it still resembles an object of some degree. I like to think of it as a scroll or a piece of parchment. Maybe it's just an abstract paper towel. Well, I don't know about that one. This is the stage where you are normal and only the most subtle memories and cognitive function are taken. Maybe progressing down some of the later songs in this stage, the music gets a little bit confusing, but not nearly to the point it gets in the other stages. It's more like the senile old man who loses his keys every now and then type of confusion, but nothing really groundbreaking. Hell, I'd say I'm in stage 1 with how often I lose literally everything I own. That was a joke. I'm not insinuating that I have dementia. I'm too young to die. The song titles also show this with bittersweet titles about reflecting on the glory days. Titles like Late Afternoon Drifting shows the subtle peace that the person feels, and titles like We Don't Have Many Days is where the person realizes that their time on Earth is limited. The song titles are also categorized by a letter, followed by a number of the song in the categorization, with the letters and numbers changing into what I'd call a mini-stage. For example, A1 through A6 are the first 6 titles of the song, with less confusing and degraded music than B1 through B6, which is the last 6 titles in stage 1, which features a little more subtle shifts in tone and confusion than the previous letter. This type of categorization continues until stage 3. Speaking of, actually, let's move on to the other stages. The description of the second stage states the following, quote, "The second stage is a self-realization and awareness that something is wrong, with a refusal to accept that. More effort is made to remember, so memories can be more long-form with a little more deterioration in quality. The overall personal mood is generally lower than the first stage, and at a point before confusion starts setting in. In this stage, we can really tell that there is a change in the mood. Notice how the description and I said mood. The stage feels a lot different than the other stages, whereas other stages feel confusing and meshed together. This stage starts that and adds a very low mood. The stage is what I like to call depressing realization and denial. You get a certain vibe from the music that is just so depressing. It feels like a gray, cloudy, and muddy day after it just stopped raining. The pitch of this music is flattening as it progresses, and more white noise is introduced that represents a plaque building up in the brain and confusion the person feels. This confusion leads to realization, but not complete realization, which leads to denial and depression. The person knows there is something wrong with them, but they don't want to come to terms with it. The categorization of the song titles is in the same format as in stage 1, with C1 through C5 being the first 5 songs in the album, and have less confusing parts than D1 through D5 being the more severe titles in stage 2. The titles of the songs in this album help you understand the mood of the album even more. Titles like Glimpses of Hope in Trying Times and Surrendering to Despair show that the person tries to cling on to any last bit of hope they may have left, but can't based on how hopeless their situation truly is. This stage is a hopeless struggle. If you need a real comparison to how much their music has changed in the background, I'm playing Check C3, What Doesn't Matter How My Heart Breaks, which is a rendition from the Heartache song by Bully I mentioned earlier, but it is made in stage 2. As you can tell, the difference in tone, the memory loss is very subtle, but the victim tries so hard to remember. Eventually he reaches memories he just cannot recall, old memories like their first kiss or their first house, but things they would have been able to recall beforehand. This gives the victim hopeless feelings of depression, but at the same time, functionality. The cover art of this stage still resembles an object, this object being a flower pot, although it is very disturbing because on the actual pot that the flower is resting in, you can see rips and tears and holes inside. This is very reminiscent to the victim losing his cognitive ability and memories. They will lose more of their cognitive ability as we progress through stage 3. Here we are presented with some of the last coherent memories before confusion fully rolls in, and the gray mists form and fade away. Finest moments have been remembered. The musical flow in places is more confused and tangled. As we progress, some singular memories become more disturbed, isolated, broken, and distant. These are the last embers of awareness before we enter the post-awareness stages. This stage is the helpless struggle we saw in the last stage. But our victim at this point is starting to forget that he is struggling. The great detail in this stage is that the music is still resemblant of actual music. You could sit down and listen to it and understand that the strings are still attached to an actual melody. This can really be the definitive difference between this stage and the later stages. The victim in this stage still understands who he is and what the processes that take place around him are, but unfortunately, as you can hear by what is playing in the background, he slowly is starting to lose that. It's still music, and there is a melody, but it feels like it's screaming at you. There's memory left, but at this point it's become tangled and is breaking away into the person's actual ability to think and function. More effort is made to recall old memories, but at this point the memories of their first kiss and first house are long gone. This breaks the victim down as the world around them starts breaking down as well. The song titles for this album are very deprived from his album, An Empty Bliss Beyond This World, with different song titles from that album mashed up with each other. For example, Tiny Gradations of Loss and Camaraderie at Arm's Length from An Empty Bliss are combined in Everywhere at the End of Time to make Gradations at Arm's Length. What you've been hearing in the background for a while now is another variation of the first song in the album, It's Just a Burning Memory. But this time, it's created in the format of Stage 3, showing just how far the person has gone at this point. The playfulness of the title is drowned out with noise in parts of the song often repeating over and over again. The cover art of this stage is just pure chaos. I don't even know what that's supposed to resemble. I like to think the bottom of it resembles a vase, like the flower pot from the last piece of art, but completely entangled with weird seaweed type structures going out around it. This entanglement becomes more apparent, however, in stage 4. Post-awareness stage 4 is where serenity and the ability to recall singular memories gives way to confusions and horror. It's the beginning of an eventual process where all memories begin to become more fluid through entanglements, repetition, and rupture. Stage 4 is the first of the last 3 stages known as the post-awareness stages. The name itself entails that these last 3 stages, the victim is no longer aware of the world around him or how it functions. The victim doesn't understand what he's doing. where he's going or who people are. In some cases, they don't remember who they are in this stage, but I'd argue they still have grasp of who they are, but definitely not what they are. In this stage, the memories they had are not necessarily non-existent, but rather thrown at them in bits and pieces. The person is hit with these memories and confused and questions whether anything ever actually happened. The stages from this point on are quite a bit longer than the previous stages, with each one playing at 1.5 hours long. There are only 4 songs, if you could call them that, in each one of these last 3 stages. The song titles for this stage are Post-Awareness Confusions, Temporary Bliss State, and Post-Awareness Confusions. 3 out of 4 of them being titled Post-Awareness Confusions, you can basically get an understanding of what they contain. It's a lot of confusing, jumbled pieces of overwhelming noise someone could hardly even consider music. Temporary Bliss State is a terrifying display of bliss. It's a confusing mesh of what sounds like wind chimes. These wind chimes might be even slightly considered blissful if it weren't for the fact that they're meshed together in random places, so the audio sounds like it's being tortured. The actual chimes in the sound jump out at you in random parts, and it's very startling and anxiety-inducing. The album cover for this album strongly resembles a face being at an angle of a profile shot, mixed in with random objects like a shoe. The picture mostly resembles what I would imply is a victim in a state of emptiness and confusion, forced to meditate every day on what is happening to them, and what is happening in the world around them. If you guys have any other ideas on what this artwork might depict, please let me know in the comments below. Now I've covered enough, and I believe it's time to move on to stage 5. Post-Awareness Stage 5, Confusions and Horror. More extreme entanglements, repetition, and rupture can give way to calmer moments. The unfamiliar may sound and feel familiar. Time is often spent only in the moment, leading to isolation. Stage 5 is a more severe rendition of Stage 4, having more confusing ruptures and breaks in the sound. The music has become completely distorted at this point, and the victim's mind is broken beyond repair. Although at some point in this confusing and terrifying state, something happens. I will describe that something in detail in a second, but if you do not want to be spoiled on what it is, skip to the timestamp shown on screen. I'll give you a second. Alright, now, let's talk about this. The description indicates that, quote, repetition and rupture can give way to calmer moments. I will play what it means here right now. In this audio, you can hear that the overwhelming noise lifts for about 30 seconds. There is still an overwhelming amount of white noise in the background, representing that the memory is not 100% clear, but it's the first glimpse of music that we've gotten in an hour and a half. After the music is done playing, it cuts straight back into overwhelming noise that was playing at the beginning of this stage. This is another terrifying state of bliss, because for a brief second the victim remembers something, but then it's gone as quickly as it was conjured up. Let's talk about the album cover. This is the second stage where the cover is unrecognizable to any known object. It sums up the stage very well as far as the lack of ability to recall what objects are. Like the last stage, there are only 4 titles in the stage, each of them being 20 minutes long. The titles are Advanced Plaque Entanglements, Synapsis Retrogenesis, and Advanced Plaque Entanglement. Advanced plaque entanglements is very straightforward. It's the plaque in the brain leading to rupture in memories and damage. Synapses retrogenesis, however, is a theory. It's the theory that the synapses in the brain responsible for distributing information throughout the brain is reversing its growth. Basically meaning the synapses are reversing the process of growth they went through beginning from when the victim was born. A reversal of age. We'll have to link to a small article down below for more on this theory. But with that, I believe we're ready to cover the last stage of the album. Stage 6. Post-awareness stage 6 is without description. This line of text is a near perfect way to describe this stage. The stage itself is huge walls of sound. There's hardly any pieces of overwhelming noise when you reach this stage. The noise isn't screaming at you necessarily, but it's more of an empty, brutal void of noise. The victim at this point has been reduced to a vegetable. He's no longer being flooded with broken memories. Rather, there are no memories. The victim is left to meditate, not knowing the world around him, with hardly any thoughts left inside of him. He is left only living in the moment, not knowing what the moment is. Before we can really move on to anything else, we have to talk about the album cover. The album cover is empty. It's the backside of a canvas, but there's only blue tape on it because it's a shell of what it was when it's turned over. This represents the emptiness of stage 6 and what it represents to what it has done to the victim's mind. This album cover is the most brutal of the rest of them, and it's honestly heartbreaking. The titles in this stage can serve as a slight description of the whole stage itself. Like the previous 2 stages, the titles in this stage are each 20 minutes long, with 4 titles in total. A confusion so thick you forget forgetting. A brutal bliss beyond this empty defeat. Long decline is over, and place in the world fades away. These 4 titles are the conclusion of the album. It displays how the victim is left in a small lack of conscience, only there to inevitably choke on his own spit and die. The last 15 minutes of the album starts with overwhelming sounds of an organ, or string noises that remain stagnant for a long period of time. This can possibly represent the victim passing over into the other life, but it could also just be another piece of noise that's been introduced throughout the entire album. And this is another point where I'm going to put a spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't listened to the album. It is an incredible experience to listen to the whole 6 hours, and if you want to have that experience yourself, I strongly recommend you go listen to it yourself. If you don't want to be spoiled, please skip to the timestamps shown on screen. Now with that out of the way, the last 5 minutes. After listening to these past 15 minutes of overwhelming organ and string noises, the sound breaks. Once noise picks up again, you're introduced to a sound resembling people loading something heavy into something else. Then light piano sounds and a choir in the background. The victim at this point has passed away, and this is the sound of their funeral. The first time I listened to this album, I was uncomfortable the entire way through. And then this last part of the album, I cried. This album has definitely given me a grasp on reality and how little time we have on this earth. I am at this point very inclined to want to visit my family, and especially my uncle. You know, I used to go do so much together, and he's left into a state of a decaying brain. I doubt he remembers who I am at this point because he's too far gone. I miss him because he's already dead. To those who also have a family member who is suffering from any form of dementia, I highly encourage you to listen to this album because it is definitely a life-changing experience that will completely change the way you view your time on Earth. With that being said, I look forward to the future, and I will cherish the memories I have made thus far, because one day I know I may lose them. Thank you for watching this video.